Hello again, everybody. Great to have you along for yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. We're delighted to welcome you all as we head towards Halloween here in the year 2024. But, of course, the football season continues, certainly in the NFL, and that's what we're going to be talking about today because we have one of the premier, well, I guess you'd call him a broadcaster, play-by-play, whatever terminology he'd like to use. But
that's right.
In the National Football League, a guy that's been around probably more than half of you have been around here on the face of this earth. He's been around a long, long time. Indeed, one of the best of all time. He's in the Hall of Fame and all that good stuff. So we'll talk to him shortly. But in the meantime, we say hello to Marnie and Marjorie. My name is Scott. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Great to be here.
Great to be you. Marnie, you're doing the location out there in North Carolina today, huh?
Yes, I'm remote today.
Right,
so I'm
you
sorry.
got it.
I miss you guys. Taking care of some family business here in the Carolinas.
Okay, but you
I'm here with you in spirit.
And of course, when we say Florida or North Carolina or Georgia this time of year, after all that's taken place over the course of the last 30 days, you're doing all right? Everything cool?
Yes, thank you. We are doing well over here where we are. My daughter goes to Appalachian State, and so that's in Boone, North Carolina. And they were definitely impacted by the hurricane 2 weeks ago. Well, actually 3 weeks ago, but they've had a little bit of a 3-week break, and it looks like school is going to be starting again tomorrow. So I'm happy about that.
Good news,
sure,
huh? Yeah.
A lot of people are, but I think that they're going to have to just adjust and roll with it and learn how to adjust. And those are all good things. And we know that, sports teams adjust and roll with it all the time.
Well, you know all about that because, of course, your grandfather was one of the former owners of the Philadelphia Eagles in the National Football League. Why don't you tell us about Mom and your grandpa before we introduce our special guest, because it's certainly along the lines of what we're talking about today.
Yes. Well, my grandfather, Leonard Toes, owned the Philadelphia Eagles for about 20 years. And my mom, Susan, ran the team for my grandfather and is still to this day the first and only female vice president, legal counsel, and general manager of a professional football team. And so those are accomplishments that I'm very proud of my mom. And actually today is the 50th anniversary of the opening of the very first Ronald McDonald House in Philadelphia. So
that's wonderful.
That is also something that happened while my grandfather owned the Philadelphia Eagles. The very first Ronald McDonald House opened up in Philadelphia. And since then, in 50 years, they have now been, open houses all over the world, and a lot of people have used the services of the Ronald McDonald House. So football and philanthropy, they always go together.
Yeah, I understand. I had a golf tournament here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Scott Murray Charity Classic, 27 years, and we raised $4 million for the Ronald McDonald House in that period of time. So I am very, very aware of all the incredible things your grandfather created with friends back in Philly umpteen years ago, 50 years ago. So congratulations for being a part of that.
50 years ago. I wonder what it was like back then.
Well, that's before you and I were born, remember?
Yeah, before my time,
right,
but I'm sure it was pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, let's get to why we're here today, and we're talking about the man himself, the voice of the Dallas Cowboys, America's team. And it's always great to see him, but he's become a dear friend to all of us here, and we can't thank you enough for stopping by. Mr. Brad Sham, how are you?
I'm okay, and thanks very much for having me. And I remember 50 years ago.
You were in second grade, right?
Yeah, no, I was a little further along than that.
Well, I tell you what, it's hard to believe 50 years ago.
I know, it's crazy.
That would have been back in the 70s, I guess. Mm-hmm. And let's see, was it
early 70s?
Yeah,
was it Frank Lieber that was doing the Cowboys then?
Mm-hmm.
No, Frank actually never was the full-time radio voice.
Right.
But he did Tom Landry's TV show and Tex Schramm's radio show.
Okay.
And he was the sports director of the radio station that carried the Cowboys, so he did games when he was available. I think in the early 70s, I actually think that Vern Lundquist was on the broadcast. Vern was my first partner. Mm-hmm. Bill Mercer might have still been doing.
Was it Bill? Was it? Okay.
Yeah, because Bill Mercer was doing the play-by-play when they played the Colts in the Super Bowl in '71.
Okay, that would have been Super Bowl VI.
Yeah, and it was a little bit before my time, but I was living in the market, and I believe Bill Mercer, who is still going strong in his late 90s.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yep.
Wonderful.
And I was there when we put him in the Texas Sports Hall of Fame just a couple of years ago. What a great thing. And I'm pretty sure Bill was the play-by-play man back in 72.
And
So
as you
what
said,
year did you take over as play-by-play?
So I came in the middle of the 76 season working with Vern, and I worked with Vern for 8 years as the albatross
so what,
around his neck.
84, I think, is when he left and went to CBS,
And,
right?
Yeah, he was actually at CBS doing college football.
Right.
They moved him
Right.
to the NFL. So I was with Vern from 76 to 84, and then I started doing play-by-play in 84.
Okay, so then you and I met in 86 when I became a Cowboys beat writer. It's been a while.
For the Dallas Times-Herald. Right?
Oh, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram.
the Star-Telegram,
Yes,
okay.
yes. And then I went over to the Dallas Morning News, so that's
Yeah,
probably
okay,
what you're thinking
okay.
of. But
Yeah.
it's amazing that we met when I was 11.
Yes, it's,
You
it's
know?
astonishing.
That's right, second grade.
You were so accomplished even then.
Yeah.
Your nose is
but
growing, Marjorie.
I know it is.
Yeah.
I can even feel it. Yeah.
Well, as you look back, we've got all kinds of things to ask you, Brad, but all the people you just met, Hall of Famers in their own right, and you a part of that as well. But is there one thing that comes to mind? You know, we said Bill Mercer, Super Bowl 6 and 70. No, well, that was Super Bowl 72, and then 78, Super Bowl 12 when they played the Broncos. But I just wondered, as you look back there, being involved in just getting involved back at that time, and then here we are in 2024, for Pete's sake, and you're still the man, you're still the voice. Is there one thing that you'll always cherish about being a part of that broadcast team?
It's always people. It's
Okay.
always the people that you work with. Vern and I are still great friends today. We stay in touch. So, his name is Merton Laverne Lundquist. That's his given name.
Right.
And so I would call him Laverne, and he would call me Shirley. And our communications to this day, he will, if he's texting me, he'll say, "Hey, Shirley." And
Oh, you're kidding. That's great.
no,
That's
Great stuff.
wonderful.
so I learned so much from him, and I was really so unqualified to be doing what I was hired to do, which was do analysis. That was actually just a small part of my job. But being the color man, I learned an awful lot from him. And then so for 8 years, we formed a great lasting friendship, and then I worked with Dale Hansen for 10 years, and Charlie Waters for 1, and Babe Laufenberg and I have been together 26 or 7
Has it
years.
been that long with
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
I know we've been together longer than any of our marriages have lasted, so...
Are you guys wearing rings?
No, we're not. We just cohabitate in a radio booth 17 times a year. So those relationships those are lifelong friendships.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that gratifies me the most, Scott, is seeing players, running into players from some of the coaches are gone, but not just the 70s, even though I wasn't on the crew in the 60s, I got to know so many of those guys. And they're starting to struggle now. They're at that stage of life, but becoming friends with Bob Lilly and Cliff Harris and Mel Renfro and Tony Dorsey. I just saw Tony a couple of weeks ago.
Did you?
Yeah, and it was an event Scott was at.
Okay.
The Cotton Bowl had a college football
Right.
thing, and Tony brought his Heisman Trophy.
Oh, that's nice.
And then the friendships that you make, especially with the players and coaches through the years, and from when I started on those broadcasts in the 70s, we were the same age.
Right.
And then when they had their winning run in the 90s, I was like their big brother, and now I'm like their grandfather. But you still really cherish the friendships. And when the Cowboys played the Giants a few weeks ago, it was a Thursday night.
Right.
And so we're checking into the hotel, and I was suddenly aware of a mountainous presence next to me, and this gigantic arm draped over my shoulder. It was Tyron Smith.
Oh, wow.
And Tyron and I are great friends. He's one of my favorites, and of course he's playing for the Jets now.
Right.
So it was Thursday night, so he came by to see his guys.
Yeah, he's free.
Yeah, and so it's that kind of thing. That's far and away the best part of it.
Oh, that's great. You talk about Babe Laufenberg, and who I had no idea, 26 years.
26 years, yeah. That's
Babe
crazy.
called me when he left, was it 1991? I think it was. Was it 91 that he left the Cowboys? I think 90, 91.
89 might have been
90.
his less. Yeah.
Okay.
No. He played in 90. He played in 90.
Yeah, he played in 90. So I think it was 91. He called me and he said, "Scott, you've had Harvey Martin. I remember 10 years ago, Harvey Martin. Now you got Drew Pearson doing some stuff with you. Any chance you could help me get into broadcasting?" I said, "What do you want to do?" He said, "I don't know." So I got him to do Friday and Monday. On Fridays, he'd come in and talk about what's going to be taking place on Sunday. And then on Monday, play Monday morning quarterback.
And, he was one of those guys who was smart enough to understand as he was playing that he had to have a job pretty soon.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
he was. You're absolutely right.
so he
was
started
smart
working.
enough.
He did even before he did television with you. He did some radio stuff in Dallas.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I got a call from not KRLD, but
he was on KZEW.
92.5.
He was on
92.5.
KZEW.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 92.5 called me and they said, "Scott, you got Babe Laufenberg doing that show with you on Friday and Monday." I said, "Yeah." And they said, "What do you think about him? We are thinking of having a morning guy on our sports broadcast every day, Monday through Friday." And I said, "You serious? What do you think about him?" I said, "Definitely.
Yeah.
He's great. He's a good guy, and just go for it."
He was.
And-
He always had the knack. He's very funny.
Yeah.
Very, very funny and dry.
Yes.
And so it to me, he is a little bit like Bob Uecker.
Yeah.
That's
a good analogy.
that
That's a great analogy.
Bob Uecker can talk serious baseball with you all day long. He was a major league player.
Right.
Babe played for 8 years, I think, in the NFL.
In the NFL,
And he had some great moments. He set all of Indiana's passing records, which have been broken since. But he wasn't just a joke. He was a serious
definitely.
player. But he was smart enough to understand that he was going to need a job pretty soon. So he started doing that while he was playing, as you're saying, and that worked out for him.
Up here's the quick end to that thing. And he went to 92.5.
Right.
And so at any rate, he's over there and it's going great. And they call me and they said, "He's great. How do you think he'd go at the Olympics?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sure if you asked him, he'd go." They said, "Well," and all of a sudden the next day I get a call from Babe, "Hey, I'm going to the Olympics."
That's
he says,
wonderful.
"Coca-Cola is going to send one person from our station," and the station said, "I can go." And he said, "When are you going to be over there?" And I told him I'm going over to the beginning of the Olympics. It was in Barcelona, Spain is where it was that year. And I said, "But we don't have anybody covering the second half." He said, "You want me to do it?" So he stayed over there and he covered the Olympics from Barcelona.
And that's how it works. As you know, that's how it works.
And again, he was great. And now you've been with him umpteen years.
26 years.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
he
crazy.
actually started doing he did the pre and post game shows, and then when they got into that Super Bowl run,
Right.
we would have three men in the booth. He would work with me and Dale together for the Super Bowl and a couple of the playoff games.
Okay.
Then I
okay.
left to do the Rangers for 3 years.
That's right.
And in 95,
96, and 7, wasn't it?
And then I
Yeah.
came back in 98, and they'd had a few other people in there, and then it was just me and Babe, and it's been just me
Right.
and Babe since 98.
So I've got to ask you this. I don't know if you're familiar, but I teach in the media arts department at the University of North Texas.
I've heard.
And I have a lot of students that want to go into play-by-play and that kind of thing. What was your story? How did you always want to go play-by-play? What was your goal, and how did you get to this
First of all,
point?
you came out of Missouri, didn't you?
Like,
Didn't you go to
University of
Missouri?
Missouri.
University
Yeah,
of
that's what I
Missouri.
mean, and that's a great journalism
I realized
school.
when I was probably a sophomore in high school that I was not going to be playing center field in the major leagues. And
that's about how old I was when I realized I wasn't going to be quarterback of the Cowboys.
there you go. And we lived in Chicago, which is my hometown, and I'm a huge sports fan, and so during the summers I would watch baseball, and they had the Cubs and the White Sox on television every day and radio. So I was listening to and watching both teams every day, and I had an epiphany one day that the announcers that I am listening to are the same guys every day. Well, that means they go to the ball game every day. I want to go to the ball game every day.
Exactly.
I didn't have a thought in the world about making a living. Money wasn't even I just wanted to go to the ball game every day.
Yeah.
And so.
And did you
So
see yourself in baseball then originally?
that's what I
Well,
was gonna say.
that was my objective, was to be a Major League Baseball announcer. But so I graduated high school in. You talk about older than most of the people watching and listening. I graduated high school in 1966, and there weren't a lot of the great program at North Texas that you're talking about, and there are many others didn't exist. So Missouri had probably the best undergraduate journalism program in the country. Northwestern had a great graduate program. And since then, of course, Syracuse has a program that in radio and television that rivals Missouri's, and they've turned out a lot of big people, Mike Tirico and Bob
And a shout out
Costas.
to my alma mater, Arizona State, the Cronkite School.
Yeah. So the point is
Dick Clark, I think, even went to Syracuse.
Might have.
Yeah.
But in 1966, there were not those schools. So Missouri was the best journalism school.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And it
That's
was
a
the
good
only
one.
place I applied, and I went there, and I found out while I was there about journalism, and I found out that there was more than just doing baseball games to life that appealed to me, but I also found out you could cover sports. You could be a sports journalist. You didn't have to give one up. And so that really worked out. When I graduated, I did a stint in the National Guard because I was in the first year of the lottery, and I had my lottery number was Rice Paddy.
Oh, okay.
And
Wow.
so I was lucky enough to get into a National Guard unit. And the summer, all of this, Marjorie, is why I believe that something bigger than me has been in charge. The summer that I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana, which I don't recommend, by the way, spending the summer in Fort Polk but I did. The summer I was there, my dad's work took my family from Chicago to Dallas. When I got out of the Army, I didn't have a job, and I went home, which was Dallas. And I spent a few months looking for work, and I finally got a job with a radio station that no longer exists, WRR-AM, and one of the most interesting experiences of my life, it was a city-owned station that it's a whole movie.
Oh, really?
But But the guy who hired me, the late Joe Hickman, told me straight out, they were trying to do news. They had trying to establish a news presence. They had the worst ratings in town. Nobody listened to them. But he told me, if you want this job, you've got it because you have a journalism degree from Missouri, and I would work for $600 a month.
Oh.
And in
A month.
A month. And in 1970, $600 took care of my car and my apartment.
Yeah. The apartment was probably only 100 something, I would imagine, and the car maybe $98 or something.
Yeah, exactly right. So,
And so were you in sports or news?
well, my first job was in news, and I pushed. At first, I had to show them that I was willing to work as hard as need be to be good at what they hired me to do.
Yeah.
And then I started to kind of push and nudge and say, well, I'd like to do some sports, and it's really and so they finally got sick of listening to me, and they said, okay, we got a half-hour news block at noon, Monday through Friday. We'll give you 5 minutes for sports at the end of it, but we're not paying you any more. I said, I don't care. So I'm doing news, and now I'm doing sports. So I got credentials for everything that moved in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I went to practices. I went to Dallas-Fort Worth Spurs games because it was before the Rangers, and Dallas Blackhawks games, and college football games, and you cover the Cowboys. So I'll put a parentheses. This is one of my favorite things that happened to me during that time while I was working there. The first president that I ever met was Lyndon Johnson.
Oh.
So it was one night at Texas Stadium, and I'm just a reporter for WRR. I'm watching the game in the press box and going down to get sound after the game. And the word goes around the press box, Lyndon Johnson's here. Now, I'm a kid of the 60s, all of the demonstrations and anti-war.
Right.
And so you know how you talk in the press box, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, I hope I run into Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, you had a few things you wanted to tell
I
him.
would like to share some thoughts. I will tell him if I see him. So game ends, down in the locker room, walking around interviewing guys, and I turned a corner and ran smack into Lyndon Johnson, nose to nose. And I looked him right in the eye and I said, Mr. President, would you sign my press pass, please?
I love that story.
Yeah, me too. And he did. He smiled. All of the creases in his face, he smiled, and he did. So
That's hilarious.
I did that. And the other thing that was significant that I had a chance to do during that period, I was there close to 5 years, was I started the first radio call-in sports show in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I'd listened to one as a kid in Chicago. I could call. Ernie Banks was on. I could call and talk to Ernie Banks.
That's a thrill.
And we didn't have a show like that in town. So it was about 1972, and I went to the same people that I worked for, and I said, we don't have this, and it would be good, and people would call, and I just pestered them. And they finally said, all right, we'll give you an hour, 6 o'clock on Sunday night, but we're not paying you any more.
Exactly.
Don't care.
But that's the beauty of a small station when you're creating a career, because you could go talk to them and create jobs like you did.
And we had there was nothing like it, so everybody in town. I remember one night, in my mind, this was all on the same night, because the Rangers had come here. So I know that we had Toby Harrah, who was the Rangers shortstop, and Mike Ditka, who was the Cowboys assistant coach and reserve tight end,
Right.
and Hayden Fry, who was the
Wow.
head coach at SMU.
Yeah. Right.
And people would come, and we were in Fair Park. People would come, didn't think anything about it. So that was a significant deal, because the way I got to where I am is I did that show from, I'm going to say 72 until I left there in the spring of 75, and I did PR for a professional soccer team in Denver. And, sometimes you need a change, and
Right,
life
right.
happens. And that team folded after the one season, and then I went and worked for the team in Chicago in 76, and I was working for that team when an opening came up at KRLD.
Oh, okay.
And that was the Cowboys' flagship station. And the main job was doing that talk show that had been started to compete with me, which
Right.
of course blew me out of the water.
Right.
Doing the talk show, doing sportscasts in afternoon drive. I would go out and cover everything and compile sound to feed to Frank Gleber, who was their morning
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
And working with Vern on the Cowboys as the color man. And so if my dad's work had taken him from Chicago to Waterloo or Bangor or Portland, then I wouldn't be here.
Right.
But it didn't. It brought him here. And then I really believe that God gives us free will. He will put us on a path. That doesn't guarantee what's going to happen at the end of the path, or that we're going to make it to the end of the path. But I'll put you on the path, and I'm going to give you free will to see what you can do with it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah. And so everything else that's happened kind of came from that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Great
Marnie,
story.
Marnie, get in here.
Well, it seems like you actually made a lot of things happen. So it wasn't as though you were sitting back and expecting them just to fall into your lap.
Oh, yeah.
Where
No.
did that idea of being resourceful and being like, I'm going to, like, who is that, your dad, your mom? Both?
Yeah,
Like,
well,
being resourceful is obviously a huge skill of yours.
My dad instilled. Look, my parents were young parents in the 50s, So the woman's role was to raise the children. And much later in life, and near the end of my mother's life, I really kind of gained a full appreciation for the talents that she had, that she set aside, all the dreams, all the things that she wanted to do, and had the ability and the wherewithal, but she put them aside because in the 50s, women stayed home and took care of the house and raised the children. And so my dad, who was an optometrist, he was very resourceful, and he believed very much in work ethic and doing what you're supposed to do. I remember one time I was getting pretty decent grades, and I came home and I said, "Hey, Dad, every other kid is getting like $5 for every A they get on their report card, and I get nothing. What's going on?" And he said, "My job is to go out and make money so our family can have a house and eat. Your mother's job is to raise you boys. Your job is to go to school and do the very best you can do. Why would I give you extra for doing what you're supposed to do?" Okay, I guess
makes sense.
I guess I understand. You don't have to agree, but thank you for clarifying. Marnie, I'll tell you one other thing that really was a kind of a precursor for that. When I was in a junior, I was near the end of my junior year in college, and there were internship interviews. So I went on an interview, and there was a company, Scott, you may remember them, Avco Broadcasting.
Yeah,
okay,
yep,
they were also an insurance company, I think, but they had a lot of broadcast outlets.
Yep.
So they scheduled this day, and they were doing news intern interviews and advertising interviews. So I signed up, and I go to the appointed place, like near the end of the day, and somehow I'm at the advertising internship interview. And I went through it, did it, whatever I did, answered all the questions, and I thought, this doesn't... And I was really not an outgoing kid. Something at the end of that interview, it's like 5 PM, something at the end of that interview made me say to the guy, "Look, I'm not sure this is where I'm supposed to be. I think I was supposed to be in the broadcast intern interview." And he said, "Well, here it is. You signed for this." And I said, "Well, yeah, but..." He said, "The day's about over." And I said, "Yeah, but is there any chance?" And so he said, "Well, let me see." And so he got me into that interview, and I got that internship.
You're serious?
Yeah, no, yeah. And so the summer of 1969, I spent working for a radio station in Washington, D.C., and learned as much in 3 months of practical experience as I did in a 2-year journalism school program.
Wow.
But if I hadn't spoken up, which was out of character for me, I would not have had that. And so my dream, I knew that when I got out of the Army, my dream was to, be a sportscaster. And so I was like so many of us, when we're young, in our 20s, right out of school, you're too stupid not to know. You don't ask that. Just keep your head down. What do you got to lose? So, I did that. Now, there have been many times that I tried to take that approach and get other jobs, supplemental jobs, and I didn't get them. And sometimes you get them and sometimes you don't.
So you mentioned that early on, too, that when you were thinking, wait, these broadcasters are at all the games.
Yeah.
And you said you weren't going to be a baseball player. You must have played baseball. So growing up, what were your sports? And you mentioned brothers. So if you could tell us.
I have a brother. I have a younger brother who was a swimmer for a while till he developed asthma. I still have him. We had a Jewish mother who did not believe in her sons doing physical activities because we would get hurt. That was how she was brought up, which was so ironic because my dad was a championship high school athlete in Chicago for many.
Really?
He had track records that stood for decades.
You're serious?
He was a great softball player, but my mother just knew if I went and played baseball, or God forbid I should play football, then I was going to break several things. So that was not going to happen. And finally, I was a sophomore in high school, and I said, I'm going out for baseball. Now, all I'd ever done is play on the sandlot, just play with neighborhood kids. So, needless to say, I did not have a great day at the first. And then I mysteriously developed a bad back that kept me from going back the second day. So I said, okay, well, I think that's probably not the path for me.
But you would have liked to have played.
Yeah, well, I would if I'd had it to do again. I would have tried to find a way to convince her of the benefits of. I would have played. I certainly would have tried to play baseball.
Yeah.
If you play from a young age, then you're going to be much more competitive and to have a chance to develop skills and who
not
knows?
only on the field, but the skills about teamwork and things like
All of
that
that
have a lot of value. And before Scott asks the next question, I'm going to just throw one more in that referring to something that you had already said earlier. You said that your mother had given up some things.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. One time I asked my mother, if she didn't have 5 kids, what would she be doing? And she looked at me and she said, I'd have gone to Hollywood. And I said, Hollywood? I didn't know you wanted to be an actress. And she goes, oh, no, not an actress. I want to be a stunt woman. So,
Are you serious?
yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yes, I loved it. Oh my gosh, it was just so my mom. So, but now, what are some things that were skills or things that she may have passed down to you, even though she didn't get to participate?
I think the thing that she most would have wanted to do was be a sportscaster.
Really?
She would have wanted to be one?
Oh my God,
Really?
that just made me get choked up a little bit.
She's the reason I'm a sports fan. We lived in a lot of places. My dad's job moved us around, but every summer she would take me and my brother back home, see her parents. We'd spend most of the summer in Chicago. And she would take me to the ballpark.
Oh,
that's what we did. And we watched everything. My grandfathers and her brother, all great sports fans, and I learned how to curse out coaches by listening to my father's uncles and cousins gathered around a radio listening to Bears games. Oh. They called George Halas names I'd never heard. And so that's kind of when I learned about the passion of sports fans.
Right.
But yeah, she could have been a lot of things. She could have been a lawyer, which she might have wanted to do. She loved to dance. She was in a lot of amateur charity club programs. She danced until she was probably in her 40s, but she would have loved to have been a sportscaster.
Wow.
What would she say to this day? How long ago did you lose her? Has it been a while?
Years,
so it's relatively recent.
5 years, yeah.
So what has she thought about your incredible career? I mean,
she was pleased. I couldn't have,
my gosh.
I couldn't have.
She's got to be more than pleased.
I couldn't. I don't think that I could have made her happier if I'd been a doctor.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Oh my gosh.
She was, but your mother. Maybe it's not true all the time, but if you have any kind of relative success, and that's a very relative term. They just think that's what you were supposed to have, and why hasn't the world given you more?
That's so true,
right? So yeah, they were both proud. I know that.
Well, that's unbelievable. 3 games that come to mind. I mean, you've been to Super Bowls. All that you have done in your.
Are you talking about Cowboys games or
just anything?
Oh gosh, almighty!
3 things is there one that maybe when you were in high school, going to the Super Bowl with the Cowboys, just anything, 3 things that come to mind. I'll never forget that. It's like people say to me, Scott, what's your all-time favorite? I said, that's easy. I was at Miracle on Ice as a kid just out of college in 1980 when the Russians lost to the Americans 4-3.
I don't know if I have specific games, but I know that when I was just thinking about this the other day, when I first started at KRLD, we had SMU basketball.
Okay.
And Frank Gleber would do some, and the ones he couldn't or didn't want to do, I would do. So I worked a game at Pauley Pavilion because of that. I worked a game at Cameron Indoor because of that.
Right.
I worked at the Dean Dome because of that. I got to broadcast games of Irvin Johnson as a freshman at Michigan State. They used to play these great holiday tournaments. SMU would go around the country. I got to see Shaquille O'Neal as a freshman at LSU, big skinny freshman. Yeah. So those were phenomenal experiences. Mm-hmm. I did get a chance to do the Winter Olympics in 1998 in Nagano.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, as you know, that's an incredible experience. I actually got to call. I claim this. So my job was to do a long form talk show from 9 a.m. to noon Japan time.
Right.
Whoever they brought in. Mm-hmm. And then I would go out and cover whatever needed to be covered. So one day they're going to run the gold medal moguls race. Moguls was new. And so this was a CBS Radio and Westwood One were just merging. So we had all the CBS briefing books. So I'm off the air at noon. 2 o'clock, you're going to the mountain to do moguls. Okay. Let's go to the library. Absorb as much as you can about moguls. I've never heard of moguls.
I learned about them the hard way.
Yeah. And so I go out to the mountain, and they throw it to me when Johnny Mosley is about to run the American moguls.
Right.
And he won the gold medal, and I did play-by-play, live play-by-play on CBS Radio of Johnny Mosley winning the gold medal in moguls, and I will challenge anyone to find someone who did moguls play-by-play.
I've never heard of moguls play-by-play.
You never
amazing.
will again, nor will you ever again. I mean, things like that. I've had a chance to do 4 Super Bowls, and those are great.
Yeah.
But the individual games really pale for me by comparison to broader experiences and people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
Makes
what about
sense.
individual sites? Was there anything that you can think of when
You
you
mean
were
locations?
at the Eagles, for example? Locations. Anything about the people you were around, the fans that you.
Oh, well,
I remember
Philadelphia.
getting pelted by
Eggs.
I remember getting hit by.
I got hit by a
dog
beer-
bones when
yeah.
I was covering
I got
the
hit by a
playoffs
beer
in
can in
Cleveland.
Philadelphia.
Yeah. Dog biscuits that they threw. And
No,
so what about some of your?
Sure. No, the great ones are when the Cowboys have been good, and the other. There's no hate in American sports like Cowboys hate, and especially in Philadelphia, Washington, and New Jersey. It's just true.
Yeah.
And I mean, so Philly was the only place where, if it was late enough in the season, both teams were good enough. When you see a little old lady in her 80s giving you a double bird flip off, that's a memorable experience. Next to her grandson who's participating with
my
her.
goodness.
And if both teams are good enough, then we'd get egged. Mm-hmm. I knew it was a big game if the bus got egged.
Yeah.
So those are fun. When you talk about venues, the Super Bowl in '92, January '93, was because they had come from the ashes of '88 and '89.
Right.
Tom Landry's last team in 1988 was the worst Cowboys team I've ever seen.
Right.
It was they won 3 games. but-
Even worse than Jimmy's '89 team that won 1 game?
Yes, and the reason is they never said this is our team. They said, here's the guys we're starting the season with, and as soon as we can fire a bunch of them, we will.
True.
And they just churned the roster. Tom didn't really know that disaster was coming. And so that
he had a very old team at that point.
He did, and he broke some of his own rules about not letting guys stick around too long, and so they went through '88, and a few of them lasted. Some of those offensive linemen who started in the Super Bowl were there in '88,
right?
And then they went through '89, and then they went through '90 when they started. 1-7, and everybody thought, well, that's it, they're done. They're never gonna. It's gonna happen again. So by the time we get to '92, and they've come from all of that, and you see the price the players pay to get from that to this, and so we get to the Rose Bowl, and it's 4 hours before the game. And for anyone who has ever been in the Rose Bowl stadium, you understand that it is a remarkable spectacle. The sun is perfect, and there's still dew glistening on the grass, and the mountains are there, and you're just standing there in all that majesty, thinking, 3 years ago, this was unthinkable.
Right.
And then they go out and win the game and start the dynasty. But that being in that venue, when people ask me about that Super Bowl, I think about that pregame moment before, thinking, look at what these guys have done. Look where they've come. Much more than the game was fine. The game was great. But, like what they're going through now, when you've seen a lot of it, it's just a game. We're all going to get exercised, and it's awful and it's terrible. And you know what? In Philadelphia, they want Nick Sirianni ridden out of town on a rail. And
then with the Jets, they are.
Yeah, and they fired their coach, so everyone complains. I will tell you that I make no bones about being a fan. For a sports fan, I think it's a lot easier to do this job if you're a fan. And thanks to my mother, I am a stupid Chicago Cubs fan. I don't mean I just follow them. I mean I watch them every day.
Still to this day?
Every day.
Wow.
I go to Wrigley Field for about a week, at least once a summer. Just get me the best seats I can pay for, and let me just walk. I mean, I know that team inside and out. But when they won the World Series in 2016, my mother was 92. And they won, and I'm not sure how much of it she was really absorbing at that point, but I went to see her and I said, Mom, the Cubs just did something that 92.
Right.
The Cubs just did something they've never done in your lifetime.
Yeah, right.
True.
So what I learned from that, and I say this to people all the time, and they think I'm kidding. They were so bad for so long. I love baseball, and there's a majesty to Wrigley Field. If you're a Red Sox fan, you get it from going to Fenway.
Right.
If you're a Notre Dame football fan, you get it from walking into that stadium. So what I learned is I'm not in it for the winning. I'm in it for the journey. I'm in it for the excitement of watching a team. And I don't care what, in team sports, I don't really care what sport it is. I say this about football all the time. I try to tell people a football season is like a microcosm of a lifetime. And if you want to dismiss people and fire them and relegate them to the ash heap 5 or 6 games into a season, then you are telling a 25-year-old human being, you are trash and you'll never be any good and we're done with you. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. I just heard that Scott Tolzien, the Cowboys quarterbacks coach, just was saying about, he was being asked about the offense, how's it going? He said, look, if this was a hockey game, we'd be at the end of the first period. Mm-hmm. We're 6 games in. That doesn't mean they're going to get any better, but it means don't lose your mind. And what I fear is that American sports fans in particular, it may not be exclusively American, but I know it's true of American sports fans. We don't have an appreciation for the journey, and it's a game. You're supposed to be entertained, have a good time, watch the game. Mm-hmm. And we certainly don't have, because of the money they're paid, an appreciation for the physical price that players pay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they think that, well, you're making so many millions of dollars a year, so what? Well, the so what is they've got, like, if they're exceptionally gifted, they've got 10 years to do that. Right. And they are putting their bodies on the line, especially in football.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
It's not a physical sport. It's a violent sport.
Violent, yes.
Every day. Look at what happened to Aiden Hutchinson.
Oh, gosh.
And this is one of the most respected players, 3 years in the league or whatever he is. Yeah. And now he's done for the year.
Yeah.
And so they run that risk all the time. So for me, I have come to this position, the teams that I follow, and I buy Maverick tickets and I buy Rangers tickets. When I give a team my money and my emotional investment.
You got about 30 seconds left, so wrap this up.
See how quick I killed an hour? Yeah. I expect them to play hard and play smart and leave it all on the field. I've never had a ticket that guaranteed victory.
Well,
so
that's
totally
true.
Understand. We really have a minute 30 seconds left. The reason I said because
he knows how long I'll talk.
Well, yeah, that's one thing. But the other thing is, we would like to hear your legacy. When you're long gone and you're no longer doing it, what if somebody says Brad Sham, what do you want them to say?
I dislike the word legacy. I really have a tangible dislike for it. I think it's tremendously self-serving for one to talk about one's legacy.
How do you want to be remembered then?
Yeah, as someone who was honest and worked hard, did the best I could, and was fair. I found in doing play-by-play, you can say almost anything if you're fair.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Agree.
They don't want cheap shots. Players, coaches, they don't want cheap shots. They know when they screwed up. If I say somebody made a mistake, but so I would like to be remembered as having been fair and honest and having worked hard.
Yep. Well, I'd say you're on the right track.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep trying until I get it right.
Yeah.
10 seconds.
I wish I had known your mom.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. She sounds wonderful.
She was a piece of work.
Yeah.
Marnie, 20 seconds. Go for it.
No, that was amazing. And I love how you were able to, because you're such a pro, use the word journey so many times when we were listening to you, because that's really the name of our show, The Journey Through Sports and Life. So thank you for sharing your journey with us.
Here to serve.
Well, thank you, Brad. It's been great.
The voice
Thank
of
you,
America's team. Thank you, my friend.
You're
Outstanding.
welcome, Scott.
You're one of the best of all time.
Appreciate it.
And just really, I'm sure you agree.
Oh, absolutely.
No question.
Well, now you have to because he said it.
So until next time, for the man in blue, for Marnie and for Marjorie, I'm Scott. And for Brad Sham, our special guest, the voice of America's team. Till next time on Journey Through Sports and Life, stay safe and be well.